All right, so the reason for the call today is we're going to go over the transfer policy and the process because there are some changes that had to be made just based on how things are going. So the primary driver behind this is asset management. So if you guys have been reviewing your weekly reports on Mondays, everybody but like 2 sites right now is having trouble with their WAR report not matching their trending occupancy. Some of them have a delta of, 1 or 2. Some of them have a delta of 8 or 9. And this is the majority of the reason is because of transfers. So right now, the way the process is when you request a transfer. So let's say I'm going to go from apartment 101 to 102. If I come in right now and request a transfer, 102 is immediately taken off the market. What is changing is 102 will now not be taken off the market until I have completely signed my lease contract and it's approved. And I'm going to go into the reason why once I finish going through the transfer policy, okay? So the transfers, the first thing that we changed is previously there was an option, I should say, to transfer from sister community to sister community. Well, all of us are sister communities, but the problem is you're not truly a sister unless you have the same equity partner. So, for example, Hanover Post Oak has the same equity partner as Hanover West Peachtree, but people typically do not want to transfer from Houston to Atlanta. They want to transfer from Post Oak to Boulevard Place. They're not the same equity partner, so they can't transfer site to site. They truly would have to go to Boulevard and start the whole application process and transfer. They would not be able to transfer. It would just be a whole new application. So we took away the entire option to even transfer from sister community to sister community because it's not really something that happens. So transferring from site to site is not an option. You have to do a new application. Now, you can transfer within the community. So if I want to go from 101 to 102, totally fine, but there is new criteria in order to be eligible to do that. So the first thing is they have to live in the apartment for a minimum of 6 months. And this is because further down the policy, it says, they have to have good financial standing, meaning no late payments, no NSFs, and they have to be in good standing. So no, lease violations, no smoking violations, nothing like that. And really, if someone's only lived there for 2 months, you have no way of knowing if they're a good resident or not because you haven't had enough time. So that's why that 6 months is the standard now. There are exceptions to that rule, and the exception to that is if you are transferring for a customer service reason, meaning, 101 flooded, so I have to go to 102. That's customer service. You just need regional manager approval for that. And the regional manager approval must be attached in the Documents tab of Entrata. And then the other loophole to that is if you're construction. So Boulevard Place is a good example. People moved into the 9th floor because they wanted to move to the 25th floor, but 25th floor was not available yet. So if you're transferring from one floor to another just so you can get into the building, that's totally fine. We allow that. But if I am at Viridian Design District and I just moved in last month, Viridian is stabilized. There's no issue why I should be able to transfer. I just want to do it because, I want to go to a different apartment. No, have to be 6 months, okay? Now, again, for fair housing reasons, like I have, 3 people moving in with me into my 1-bedroom, I absolutely have to go to a 2-bedroom. So that's again, a loophole, but it's not really a loophole. It's more like fair housing type reasons. But if it's just me and I want to go from 101 to 102 and it's just because I want to, nope, have to have regional manager approval, okay? So again, that 6 months, you do not want to transfer someone if they have bad rental history, meaning they've lived there for 6 months and 5 out of the 6 they've paid late. You also don't want to transfer them if they've had 2 return payments, because 2 is the maximum before we allow certified funds only. And you also don't want to transfer them if they've got lease violations. So this is why 6 months is the standard, okay? Next, they have to meet the financial criteria. So it's very rare that we transfer someone and the rental unit is exactly the same price. So 101 to 102 is likely not going to both be $1,500. If I'm going from 101 to 102, chances are I'm going from paying $1,500 to $2,000. I have to qualify. If I don't qualify, then I shouldn't be able to transfer. This means they have to be rescreened and they still have to provide new income. And this is on the new application, okay? Again, if someone's transferring and they're adding a roommate, you have to ensure they qualify. Entrata will not allow you to process a transfer if they haven't been screened. Again, with the exceptions rule, if it's a customer service thing and we're transferring them because their apartment flooded or something happened, that's when you have to put in a support request with regional manager approval for us to override the screening, okay? All right, so transfer has to happen within 7 days of the apartment becoming vacant. So if I want to transfer from 101 to 102 and 102 vacant July 31st, I must transfer into that apartment no later than August 7th. Now, if a 102 is vacant right now and I want to transfer into it on August 1st when my lease is up, no, that cannot happen because you can't hold an apartment vacant for 27 days, especially on YieldStar sites because that rent drives way up. Now, asset management is not unreasonable. If you reach out and say, hey, they want to transfer, but they want to hold it for 27 days, they're willing to pay the additional price on YieldStar, absolutely is asset management going to approve that. But you have to make sure that they know and they're aware, okay? Inspections, when someone gives notice to transfer, you have to inspect their current apartment to make sure that they're even eligible. Because if they live there for, you know, a month and they've completely set a bomb off in their current apartment and the carpet has to be replaced, it's got to be fully painted, you know, they've destroyed a couple of walls, anything like that, you have to inspect it to make sure they can even transfer. Or let them know, yeah, you can transfer, but you're going to be charged, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars for the damages. So you have to do an inspection. And here in just a minute, I'm going to walk everybody through the whole process step by step. Then the transfer addendum is in Entrata. It has been updated. I sent you guys the updated one that's not in the test site, and once we finish the training, I will update your current transfer agreement in Entrata so you're on the new one and not the old one, okay? They must pay a transfer fee. We do not waive transfer fees unless you're at the end of the lease term, okay? If you are waiving transfer fees and you do not have regional manager approval, you are doing it wrong, okay? You have to have the transfer fee. Now, the reason we charge transfer fees is because it costs us money to turn that apartment. So if I've only lived there for 6 months, you have to charge me a transfer fee because I have to be responsible for those turnover and make-ready costs for my current apartment. We do not charge them at the end of the lease term because we would have had to turn that apartment anyways. So transferring at the end of the lease term is the only time we waive it with no issues. Otherwise, you must have regional manager written approval attached in Entrata. And this is stuff, guys, that we're going to start looking at when we're doing your Entrata scorecards to see how you're doing and if you have questions. So make sure you're charging them and not reversing them or crediting them back to the same charge code. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. They also have to pay a new deposit. Oh, hold on. Let me go back a little bit. So they must pay the balance on the old apartment. The process stops you and does not allow you to process a transfer if there is a balance. It won't let you. So if I'm moving from 101 to 102 and I'm transferring tomorrow, so I didn't pay my rent for the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of July in my current apartment, I can't transfer to my new apartment until I pay that balance. Additionally, before they pick up keys, you should make sure that they have paid the balance for the prorate on the unit they're transferring to. Now that they can pay on their current apartment, and you can transfer a credit all day long. A balance, though, will not transfer. So if you want to pay everything when they pick up keys to the new apartment, totally fine as long as they're paying the balance and the prorate in full. But they have to pay it on the old apartment before you can process the transfer. Okay? Anyone who wants to transfer to an apartment that is less expensive, you must have asset manager approval. This came down directly from Bruce. So if I'm in apartment 101 that's $1,500 and I'm going to 102 that's $1,200 and it's because I know it's cheaper, I can't do that unless Bruce and Travis approve it, okay? So you guys cannot transfer someone to a less expensive unit unless asset management is aware and they approve that. And it has to be in writing because they're going to go back and look for that approval to make sure it's there, okay? You do have to pay back prorated concessions. So this was a question I know that Tiffany had reached out to me and asked. And so for mathematic purposes, we're going to say I've leased an apartment and it is $1,000 a month and I've lived there for 6 months and I got 2 months free. So for 2 months free is $2,000. I've lived there 6 months. I have to pay back that $1,000. It is going to charge back on the old apartment as a concession and it's going to be concession chargeback code, okay? So when you go in and you type that concession chargeback, you're going to type in chargeback, and it'll pull up the correct concession or the correct charge code you're going to charge those concessions back to. Now, a few people, what they do is they go in and they credit the entire concession back, and then they enter it as a one-time for the amount that they're owed. That's doing double the work. If that's how you want to do it, that's fine, so long as at the end of the day, when you're charging back the concession, you're being charged back for the amount that they should not have received through the term, okay? All right, so the deposit will transfer to the new apartment. Now, what it's doing right now, and this is until next Wednesday, right now, your deposit is $300, you're paying a new deposit of $300. So when someone comes to request a transfer, they have to pay the transfer fee and they have to pay a new deposit. Right now, the old deposit is transferring and actually doubling the deposit that's on hand. Entrada has moved it fixed, and they're pushing it out with next week's release so that now the deposit that's on my current apartment will actually transfer as a beginning balance. It'll transfer as a credit of $300. It won't transfer as an additional deposit. This is why you have to pay a new deposit request to transfer. Any questions on that?
Can you explain that one more time? So if the deposit is transferring over as a credit from the current apartment?
So right now I'm in 101. My deposit on hand is $300. I'm transferring to 102 and I'm paying a deposit of $300. I paid it at the time I did the transfer request. So right now, when I move out of 101 and you process my transfer, my deposit in 102 is actually going to show $600. That's what it's doing right now. On Wednesday, though, when that feature release gets pushed out with the Entrada release, that $300 I have in 101 is transfer over as a credit. And the line item on Entrada shows beginning and balance, but it'll be a credit of $300. So that's why we have to take a new deposit. Because the deposit that's it's being moved over, it's just a credit. It's not actually moving over as a true deposit.
Okay.
Yeah. That part's confusing, but it's actually we asked them to change it to match the functionality that Yardi had, because Yardi used to let you move a deposit as a credit and then just charge a new deposit. So that's essentially what we did, is we just made them fix the functionality.
Okay.
All right, so they must sign a new 12-month lease term. So if I'm in 101 and I'm transferring to 102 and I have 6 months left on my lease, I can't sign a 6-month lease. I have to sign a new 12-month lease. The exception to that rule are my construction sites. So if I'm transferring, like if I live at Boulevard Place and I moved in and wanted to make sure that, I got in before my apartment was ready, and I've already lived here for 3 months, I can sign a 9-month lease on the new apartment when I transfer into it if that's the one I originally wanted. But that's the only exception to that rule. You must sign a new 12-month lease if you're transferring. And then finally, let's say I'm transferring to apartment 102 tomorrow. I have 48 hours to transfer without duplicate rent charges. This means I picked up my keys and tomorrow's the 4th, so I have until the 6th to move with no additional charges. But 7th, I haven't turned in keys. Heck, if on the 10th I haven't turned in keys, I'm responsible for rent from the 7th, 8th, 9th, and 10th. So those 4 days of prorated rent, I am responsible for, and you're going to add it to the existing FMO, and I'm going to walk you through that process. Okay. Any questions on the policy as it's been just adjusted?
Just out of curiosity, why do we get a prorated concession chargeback if they're required to sign a 12-month lease and they're not getting any new concessions?
That came down from asset management and accounting. Really, it's because they moved in and they, let's say my apartment was $2,000 and asset management approved for me to transfer to a less expensive apartment to $1,200. Essentially, I got 2 months free, so I got $4,000 worth of concessions. If I were to get 2 months free on my $1,200 apartment, it would only be $2,400. So you're giving them an additional $1,600 they should not have received. Now, if you transfer to an upgraded unit, if you truly feel like, okay, they should get to keep the rest of the concession, reach out to asset management. They're not unreasonable. You know, if you tell Bruce, you know, they've lived here for 9 months, do I have to charge them back for the remaining 3 months of concessions they would have received? And see what he says. If he says yes, then okay. Yeah, that's, just reach out to Bruce with asset management.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. I mean, I get it if it's like at Foxborough right now, we're not doing any concessions anymore. So if Foxborough had someone move in 6 months ago and they got 2 months free and now they're upgrading and we're telling them, oh, we're going to take an extra $500 a month in rent from you and you have to pay us back $1,000, I'd be pretty upset if I were the resident. So just reach out.
Yeah.
And again, guys, when you email them and give them the question, make sure you give the supplemental information. You know, they moved in on this day. They got this much in free rent. You know, they're transferring to a larger apartment and they're not getting a concession. Do we have to charge it back? Give documentation as to why you think they shouldn't have to be charged back. All right, so let's go through and let's do a transfer. Does anybody else have questions? Okay, so we're going to pick on Veridian. And Austin, I can pronounce his name. All right, so Austin is in apartment 1113. He has lived 6 months, so he is eligible to transfer. So Austin came in this morning and he paid his rent of $18.25, and he knows he's going to have to pay a transfer fee. All right, so we're going to enter a payment for him under here. I'm just going to enter a generic payment of $2,400. And this is transfer fee and rent for current unit, okay? All right. Austin comes in and Austin says, I want to transfer to a different apartment. All right, so you know, because you've got your site tablet open, which units are available for him to transfer to. The other option you can do is you can attempt to start the transfer, but don't actually schedule the transfer. So when you want to see what units are available, you can do that. You can start the scheduled transfer and then just check which unit. Okay, Austin, which apartment do you want to transfer to? We're going to wait for Entrada spinning wheel of death. There we go. Austin, you want to transfer into apartment 6402. Okay, perfect. It's available right now. Before we can schedule your transfer, though, this is weird. Oh, I'm in test. Sorry. Jamila, your pricing's all funky in here because I'm in test. We're going to say this apartment is $1,482. Before you can transfer, though, we need to inspect your apartment and you need to do the transfer request. All right? So for Austin, let's just do it this way. All right, so we're going to go into Documents. We're going to add a document, and this is the electronic signature document for transfers. Okay? Your transfer agreement, like I said, right now is the old unit or the old transfer agreement. It will be this one. This is what it's going to change to. So what it's going to say is the residents' names, which are listed right here. You're going to enter their current apartment number, which is 1113. 1113 on the merge field. You'll put his new apartment and then the move out and the move in date. These should not overlap. So if he's going to move out on July 2nd and move in on July 3rd, that's the dates that it should be. If he's moving out on July 15th, but he's moving in on the 1st, you're still not going to have overlapping dates. The move out date should be the day before the move in date. Move in date is the key because that's the date that you're giving them keys. They're physically moving out of this apartment within the system on one day, but if they keep the additional keys, a little protection down here that says, I understand I am liable for any damages or charges to both apartments while I possess keys to both as noted above. So this is a protection. So they may not actually be moving out as of July 3rd. They may be moving out on the 10th, but then we can charge them for those additional days. And it says that, where is it? 48 hours. Where's my 48 hours? Here. Keys must be returned within 48 hours of move out to avoid duplicate charges for both apartments, okay? All right, so when you create the electronic signature document for the transfer, you'll go next, and this is where you'll enter all of the information in the merge fields that pull in all of this transfer amount, all right? So once you've done this, you're going to say, okay, Austin, well, now that we have reviewed your apartment, let's go in and we're going to, or now that we've reviewed your transfer request, before I can approve your transfer, I need to inspect your apartment. Are you available right now? If Austin is available right now to go inspect the apartment, great. Then you're going to go into Entrada under Residence and Maintenance. You're going to go to Inspections. All of your other inspections are called automatically. They automatically get popped up when someone gives notice or anything like that. Transfers are the exception to that rule because you have to inspect the apartment before you can request a transfer. So in these cases, you'll go to Residence and then Maintenance and Inspections, and you're going to add an inspection yourself for this transfer. So it's for Veridian. I always spell the property's name wrong. There we go. Veridian. It is a move-out inspection, and it's a pre-move-out inspection done by us, and it's for apartment 1113, okay? So Austin wants to move out, so we're going to do his pre-move-out inspection, and then you click Next. So his inspection's here. You're going to go with him to his apartment and check it and make sure everything looks good. So if he passes everything, great. If you get in the apartment, it looks like Hiroshima 2.0, you're going to make sure that you're failing the items, what the issues are. So let's say his dog destroyed the carpet. If it needs to be replaced, then click Replace. If it just needs to be cleaned, then say Clean. But if it needs to be replaced, make sure you put notes in there. Dog destroyed, carpet must be replaced at move out, okay? You save it, and then be sure you take pictures. Attach pictures to whatever the issues are. Now, this is important because, one, if they've destroyed their apartment, you can't approve that transfer request. You shouldn't, because all they're going to do is go to the new apartment and destroy it. But if you do approve it, this is where you tell them, okay, you're going to be charged for the carpet, you're going to be charged for replacing the holes in the walls, you're going to be charged for the additional paint, you're going to be charged for any pet damages. No, we don't know how much the amount is until we physically move you out, but the estimate could be, you know, $700, could be $1,200, whatever the amount is. Make sure when you do the move-out inspection, this is done before you do the transfer request, okay? So you've gone through, you've, you know, passed or failed everything, everything's good to go. Once you've finished, submit it, okay? It's going to automatically pop up and say, you know, do you want to create a work order? No, you don't want to create a work order, but it's going to anyways. So create the work orders and approve it. This carpet will need to be replaced. The next thing you're going to do, because you've already completed 1113, if you say, yes, you can transfer, you're going to go back into here. Austin's going to transfer to apartment 6402 for the transfer agreement that you did over here, and you're going to push him through the process. Any questions so far? Am I going too fast? All right. Okay. So you've got him in apartment 6402. Transferring out today, and notice what Entrada does is it automatically changes the transfer move-in date when you change the transfer move-out date, okay? So if you move this, this changes. So it's going to overlap them. We're going to move him in here. We're going to move him out here. So overlapping dates, reason for transfer, we're going to go to, this is not the true transfer reasons. We'll just say transfer unit. We're not going to edit any occupants because those people are going to stay. Now, in the last call, they were asking questions. Well, what if the person wants to move out and doesn't want to go into the new apartment? You can edit the occupants here. You can edit it here and remove one at the time that you're doing the transfer request. Now, the question was, well, what if Megan wants to stay and Austin is going to move out? How do I get Austin off of the transfer agreement? Well, until all the paperwork, meaning the resident or the roommate amendment form is signed, they're both here. So on the transfer request, at the bottom, there's management notes. You can put in there, Austin will not be transferring to new apartment, only Megan will stay, and roommate amendment to be complete. You can put those management notes in there, okay? All right, so in this case, we're not going to edit any occupants. We've selected apartment number 6402. We've selected 6402. Come on, Entrada. Oh my goodness. There we go. So we're selecting 6402. And we're going to approve it. We were going to approve it. Complete. All right, so this is where you create the transfer. You can still make changes to the transfer up until this point, meaning if you want to change the move-in date, the move-out date, changes to the occupants, anything like that. Once you have generated the lease contract, you cannot make changes to the transfer. You have to cancel it out and start it all over again. And this is because there's a legally binding document that's been generated at that point, and you have to tell Entrada, no, cancel this document, we're going to start it all over again. I'm working on that functionality, and I'm hoping with the September release they have it changed to where you can now replace lease on transfers when you make those changes, kind of like with applications or with current residents. So just be prepared, that may also change. But for right now, if you want to make changes, up until the lease contract is generated, you can. After the contract is generated, you have to cancel it and start it all over again. So the functionality that's changing, the most important thing is right now you have scheduled his transfer. So his apartment 1113 is still showing current in the current functionality, and then 6402 is also off the market. So this is why your trending occupancies are not matching your WAR reports, because the settings right now show technically that he's leased both apartments. What I am changing, and I'm turning on as soon as this call is over, I'm sorry, at the end of today, I'm going to change it so that when you request the transfer, 6402 is not taken off the market until you get to the point that the lease has been completely approved. And what that does when the lease is approved, it puts his old apartment on notice. So it becomes a one-to-one. That way, your trending occupancy will then match your lease percentage. Does anyone have questions on that?
Yeah, so if you request the transfer, hi, it's me again. If you request the transfer and then it doesn't go off of the market, someone else can still lease it, correct?
Exactly, which is why you have to do the transfers immediately. So if I come in and I request a transfer, I do the inspection, you do the transfer request in Entrada like I just did, then the manager will approve the transfer request after they've ensured that the apartment's been inspected, the lease contract is ready to go, everything's good. If you have not signed the lease contract on the same day, there is exposure. So this is an education component for your residents. If they come in and want to transfer, you guys are responsible for telling them, okay, well, we've got to get your lease contract signed right now because I can't take that apartment off the market until you sign your contract. This way, when you go in to buy a car, that car is not physically yours and is not taken off the inventory on the lot until you sign paperwork. Anybody can still buy that car up until you sign. So it's the same situation here. You want to make sure you're getting them to not only do the transfer request and do the inspection and get everything approved, but they also have to sign their lease contract same day.
Got it, that makes sense. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so we've done the request. We went in, Megan has had her apartment inspected. We've done the transfer request within the system. We know what she's going to transfer to. She's approved, she's good to go. She's also paid the transfer fee and the deposit. So if you have not done the transfer form in Entrada, you have not done the inspection, you have not received the transfer deposit or the transfer fee, you cannot approve the transfer request, and you shouldn't. And this is because you're essentially, what's happening is you're charging the deposit for the transfer. If you generate that lease contract, it's going to show a deposit of $100. But if you haven't collected it, then you're essentially creating a lease contract that has wrong information. So before you can approve the transfer, I'm going to say it one more time. You must have the transfer fee paid, the deposit must be paid, the transfer request form in Entrada must be filled out, and they must have had their old apartment inspected, okay? Once you've approved the request, it then takes you to generate the lease. So you're gonna actually go through and generate the lease for training purposes to shorten this process. I'm just gonna upload any generic document and mark it as approved, and then upload. They've now transferred the lease, and then let's see if it'll let me do it. All right, there we go. Close this window. Notice right now you have a move in and a move out. You have steps 3 and steps 4. These will stay steps 3 and steps 4 if you have your dates as overlapping. So if I see after the lease has been marked approved that you have a move in and a move out, it's because you transfer up wrong. You cannot have overlapping move in and move out dates. They have to be separate, so they have to be consecutive. I moved in on the 4th, so I moved out on the 3rd. I moved in on the 20th, moved out on the 19th. If you have me moving in on the 20th, but moving out of my old apartment on the 26th, that is wrong. You have to have them one to one. So move out on one day, move in the next day. So Jamila is now going to mark this lease as approved because they signed everything. They have all 4 items that are required for the transfer. They're approved. Watch what happens over here after I mark it approved. Now it says process transfer. Step 3 and 4 became one process, and it's because you're doing them consecutively. So the transfer date is the 3rd. He's starting on the 3rd. So we're going to process this transfer. Go to process the transfer. If there is a balance and you try and process it, it will not allow you to transfer. It'll actually stop you. It'll have a red alert up here that says you cannot transfer the apartment with a balance. This is also where you need to make sure the transfer unit, they have paid the prorate on the old apartment, so it will transfer as a credit to the new one, okay? Go down, everything looks good. There's nothing extra. We're gonna go ahead and submit his transfer, right? Now, right now we have 2 FMO processes. There's the old process where you process the FMO, and then as soon as you hit post, ask you now to finalize it. The new process, you won't have to do that. The new process, any of my people that are on the call on the new process, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But when you go back here, it's passed. The FMO automatically processed. What we're going to do is revise it. We're going to revise the financial move out. So for example, let's say Megan transferred on the 3rd, or she moved out on the 2nd. She moved into her new apartment on the 3rd and she kept keys through the 4th. But she actually kept keys through the 8th. So she kept them for an additional 4 days. If rent for each day is $100, you have to go in, we're going to revise the FMO and charge her duplicate rent on the old apartment. You're not going to charge it on the new apartment because then it's going to add additional rent charges that are going to mess up your GPR. So instead what you're going to do is you're going to go to the old apartment, you're going to revise the FMO, and you're going to add the charges. And these will you will actually charge to rent. So rent residential is 4 days prorate for holding keys past 48 hours in transfer. We're going to charge $400, okay? So $400, notice at the bottom, there's a 0 balance right now. Never perform the financial move out, always transfer. This is the only time you will transfer a balance is after they've already moved out, the transfer's already been processed, and now you're gonna go back in and you're gonna complete the FMO based on actual move out charges or any additional rents that need to be charged, okay? This is where you can transfer a balance. When you hit submit, see here now it says finalize FMO. This is for the old FMO process. When you get to the new process, you'll understand what I mean when I say you won't have to finalize anymore because you'll have a little message up here that tells you the next step. So right now you guys are having to finalize it and look at the bottom. You're transferring that $400 balance for the rent that we charged to the new apartment. Then whenever you go to the new apartment on the ledger, it will show $400 being moved. Questions so far? Okay, so what is really important is that as soon as we get off this call, you need to check for anyone on your site that is set up to transfer. If they do not have their lease contract approved, then their apartment is going to go back on the market the unit that they've requested the transfer for will go back on the market, meaning they're not going to be able to hold it unless they find their lease. I'm flipping that switch this afternoon. It'll be the thing I do before I leave at the end of the day. You go and hang up with me, you got to go call those people. Now, the other reason that your trending occupancy is not tying, and I'm going to pick on Jamila again, but it's because I know in test site hers is funky because I did it that way on purpose. If you go into under the, let's close this, when you go to, on the left-hand side of the leads page, there is the leasing board. Let me show you what it looks like in just a second. Let's close this. You're going to go to under leads, tools, you're going to go to leasing. When you pull this up, you're going to pull it up for your property. So for your property, and then you also want to select the status, application completed. This is the status you want to look for because it shows you everyone who's had an application completed as well as lease started and lease completed. This is the farthest that it will go back. So anyone whose application started, which is all those prospects that go on and start an application and don't finish it, you don't want to see those. You only want to see the ones who are completed and thereafter. When you hit search, it's going to pull up anyone who is still pending. So all of these people, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people should have been moved in and they haven't been. So what this does is it's affecting your lease percentage, and it shows you've got, you know, these additional 7 people, so I think 3.75% additional lease percentage, but it doesn't show as correct on your trending occupancy. And this is because logically the trending occupancy are people who are scheduled to move in the future. Well, these are all past move-ins, so they should actually be on your current occupancy, and then these people going forward will affect your trending. So this is another reason that some of the deltas on your trending occupancy are not matching your WAR. So if you go in and you pull both of your reports and your WAR report says your lease percentage is 97, but your trending occupancy says your lease percentage is 95, the first thing you need to do is go and check here. If you've got people on the leasing board based on this status, then what that means is you need to go back and you need to talk to Anthony. Hey, Anthony, you were supposed to move in June 10th. Can I go ahead and cancel your application? Okay, great. You know, and this person was supposed to move in July 1st. Hey, Nikita. Hey, that's my brother-in-law called me. Hey, Nikita, you were supposed to move in on July 1st. Are you still going to be able to move in? Okay, well, can I cancel your application? This leasing board has to be clear. And I'll tell you guys, asset management has figured this out, and they're watching this like a hawk. So if you're not looking at this every single week and making sure your people are moved in, you're missing an opportunity. So do you have any questions so far on the process and how everything's changing? So the new policy we're going to post to Hanover Health today. Oh, somebody has a question.
I got a question, Nikki. It's Corey.
Hey, Corey.
So previously, whenever we were doing these, we were having issues because the new transfer wasn't showing up on the make-ready board for maintenance. Has that been adjusted as well?
That, I believe, is supposed to be out with the July release, but my suggestion to you is whenever you do that, after you go in and you go to resident maintenance and you have made sure the inspection is done, you're also going to want to go to the make-ready board and make sure the make-ready is there. If the make-ready is not there, you can create it. You can create a make-ready. All right,
Cool.
any other questions?
Okay.
Got it. All right, anybody else?
We're no longer allowing residents to transfer to other Hanover properties?
Only, okay, so the sister-to-sister is, so Jamila, you don't have anybody who's the same equity partner. If your regional approves it, that's different. I can't tell you no. But going property to property, if you don't have the same equity partner, we really shouldn't be doing it. If Carrie approves it, though, more power to her.
Okay.
Okay? Any other questions? Okay, so the policy will be posted to Hanover Health today. The transfer agreement, the new one, will be posted into Entrata today so that you guys will go to the new agreement. But I urge you to make sure that you go in and you check all of your transfers that are in the system right now to make sure they've been set up and completely done. If you need to know what report to pull, if you go into into reports, look up profile. If you go to profile data, I have set up a filter up here under save filters. There's THC transfer tracking. Pull that up for your site and then generate. It will pull up all transfers that are popping up for your site, and it's under sub-status. So if you've got a transfer, 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 these are the ones that you need to call them and make sure. So this is kind of an easy report to get to make sure that all of your people have had them done. Okay. So profile data, and then use the filter, THC transfer tracking. All right. Any questions? All right, if that's it, I'm gonna let you guys go. I have recorded this, so I'll send it to you so you have all the information. If you do have questions that you weren't comfortable asking on the call, don't hesitate to shoot me an email, all right?
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks, guys. Have a great day.